So, I am about to tell you a story that happened at dealerships across Geneva, Hong Kong, and Dubai. It happened to individual buyers too, people who bought dream watches at what felt like reasonable prices and discovered the market had quietly moved without telling them. That's what this video is. Watches where something happened, a clear moment, and the value fell fast. 12 tag, Heuer Aquaracer Professional, 300. There's a tag Heuer Aquaracer Professional 300 sitting on a watch exchange post right now asking $850. Original retail, $2,100. The seller has had it listed for 6 weeks. 3 lowball offers. No takers. For a long time, the Aquaracer Professional 300 was the answer to a real question. What's a serious diver's watch that doesn't cost Rolex money? The case is solid. 300 meters of water resistance is not a gimmick. The automatic movement does what it's supposed to do. People wore these on actual boats. Dive instructors had them. Marine engineers had them. For a certain kind of buyer, it was the working diver's watch that happened to also look good at dinner. That was its identity. A useful one. And then LVMH rebranded Tag Heuer into something it can't quite decide it is. The boutiques got glossier. The prices crept up. The marketing started chasing watch influencers instead of racing drivers and divers. The moment you start chasing luxury positioning, your old customers notice they're no longer the target. The people who bought the Aquaracer because it was the working man's serious diver watch looked at the new boutiques and the new price tags and went to Seiko, or Tudor, or Christopher Ward. The aspirational buyers the brand was chasing didn't pick the Aquaracer either. They went to the Submariner, or they went to nothing and put the money elsewhere. So the Aquaracer sits in the middle. Too expensive for what it used to be. Not prestigious enough for what it wants to be. That's not a product problem. That's a brand identity crisis, and the secondary market priced it immediately. Tag Heuer's Aquaracer Index is down over 15% in the last 5 years on watch charts. For a watch that used to hold value reasonably well among working divers, that's a meaningful shift, and the direction hasn't reversed. Pick any diver watch forum thread from the last 2 years, not the watch porn Instagram feeds. The actual buyer communities on Watch You Seek, and deskdivers.com, where people post asking for advice on a $600 budget. 10 years ago, the Aquaracer's name came up. It came up alongside advice like, get the rubber strap variant, wear it forever. Today, those threads recommend the Seiko SPB 143 at $350 or a Tudor Black Bay 54. The Aquaracer doesn't come up the way it used to, not because anyone decided to stop recommending it, because the brand's identity drift filtered through to the buyers before it filtered through to the brand. That's one brand losing its footing. The next watch on this list was built on brand legitimacy that exists. The collapse is harder to explain. 11 IWC Portugueser. Chronograph Ref 371605. If you type IWC Portugueser Chronograph Ref 371605 into Chrono 24 right now, you'll find examples at $4,950. Retail price is $8,900. That is a 43.5% discount on a Swiss manufacturer watch. Not a fashion brand. Not a homage. IWC Schaffhausen. The Portugueser is one of the most architecturally clean chronographs in production. The dial proportions are almost academic. Thin numerals, a clear subdial layout. A case that doesn't shout at you. It was the watch serious buyers recommended to people who asked what a real watch looked like without the Rolex markup. It had a devoted following on forums. Fratello ran dedicated threads. Worn and Wound consistently put it in best value discussions at the price point. What happened was structural, not scandalous. Richemont, which owns IWC, started leaning its marketing energy into Cartier. The Santos got a cultural moment it hadn't had in decades. The Cartier narrative became compelling. The Cartier secondary market moved up, and IWC, sitting inside the same corporate building, got less oxygen. Not zero oxygen, less. The IWC brand index on watch charts is down 16.7% over 5 years. The 371605 is down 24.4%. Not because the watch got worse. The movement didn't change. The finishing didn't change. The proportions didn't change. The watch is still doing exactly what it always did, but the story around it got quieter. And watches without a loud story trade at a discount every time. The Portugueser lost its story, but the next watch lost something more specific. It lost the customers who made other customers want to buy it. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. That's why I created a complete insider guide to buying watches. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. 10 Tudor Black Bay GMT Pepsi Ref 79830RB. I want to call this one out specifically because what happened here was precise. The Tudor Black Bay GMT launched at a retail of $5,275, a black and red bezel. GMT complication. In-house MT 5652 movement, COSC certified. For a watch at that price point, it punched significantly above its weight. Forums lit up. The Pepsi nickname, borrowed from the Rolex GMT Master, carried cultural weight that Tudor borrowed without paying for it. For a while, that was fine. People who couldn't get a Rolex GMT got this instead, and felt smart about the substitution. Then Rolex launched its certified pre-owned program in late 2022. What that did, quietly and irreversibly, was change the arithmetic for anyone shopping in the $15,000 range. Suddenly, you could buy an authenticated pre-owned Rolex GMT Master 2 through an official dealer with warranty for a price that made the Tudor look like a consolation prize instead of a smart choice. The Rolex adjacent pitch collapsed the moment actual Rolexes became more accessible. The Black Bay GMT Pepsi now trades at $3,009 on the secondary market. That is 43% below its retail price. A watch marketed on proximity to Rolex suffered most when Rolex's own certified pre-owned program moved the goalposts. Be honest, did you buy a Tudor because you couldn't get the Rolex? So, Tudor got caught in Rolex's orbit. The next brand on this list got caught in something even harder to escape. Its own mythology. 9 IWC Portugueser. Automatic 4. 2 Ref. 500703. Different watch from number 11. Different problem entirely. The Portugueser Automatic 42 was IWC's attempt to put its own caliber 52010, a legitimately impressive in-house movement with a 7-day power reserve, into the most iconic dress watch format the brand makes. The intellectual argument was clear: not just a watch, a movement story, a manufacture story, an engineering story that justified the price. Retail started around $6,500 for a clean steel configuration, and collectors read all the right things into it. IWC manufacture caliber, 7-day power reserve, Portugueser proportions. On paper, the case was strong. The problem is that the market doesn't pay for movement stories unless the brand already has permission to charge for them. Patek has that permission. Rolex has it. IWC doesn't, not at the same level. So when a buyer compares the Portugueser Automatic's secondary market price against what a similar sum gets on the certified pre-owned market from a brand with stronger secondary traction, IWC loses, badly and consistently. Watch Charts rates the Ref 500703 with an extreme risk score of 77 out of 100 for secondary market depreciation. The watch is down nearly 20% over 5 years. That score is not a knock on the watch's quality. It's the market saying, not enough people want this at this price in the future. That's not a movement problem. That's a permission problem. And you can't engineer your way out of it. Honestly, I keep coming back to this one, because the watch is well made. The movement is real, the design is coherent, and none of that matters if the market story isn't there. IWC couldn't buy its way into the story it needed. The next watch tried to buy its way out of its own story. That was the problem. 8 Hublot Classic Fusion. The Big Bang had a reason to exist. Loud, architectural, oversized. It said something specific about the person wearing it. Whether you agree with what it said is beside the point. It had an argument. The Classic Fusion doesn't have that argument. It's the quieter Hublot. The "I like Hublot, but I want to wear it to a funeral" Hublot. Strip the fusion concept of its maximalism, and you're left with a thin line between refined and nothing to say. The classic fusion landed on the wrong side. At retail, a steel classic fusion chronograph sits around $8,000. On Chrono24 and Watch Exchange, you'll find clean examples for $3,500 to $4,500, depending on the reference. That's a 40 to 50% drop from retail. For a current production luxury Swiss chronograph, that's not depreciation. That's a verdict. The secondary market is making a statement. The classic fusion exists for buyers who find the Big Bang too aggressive. But those buyers tend to have better options at $8,000. Breguet, JLC, Grand Seiko's SBGR range. The classic fusion is the watch you buy when you want Hublot on the invoice, but can't quite commit to looking like a Hublot person. And as it turns out, that's not a large enough market to support the price. Hublot's quiet watch couldn't find its voice. This next brand didn't have that problem, but its voice said the wrong thing at exactly the wrong moment. 7. Vacheron Constantin, overseas, 4,500 V. This is the entry I can't fully make peace with, so I'm going to give you the observation that keeps bothering me and let you sit with it too. The Vacheron Constantin Overseas Ref, 4,500 V, is made by the oldest continuously operating watchmaker in the world. Founded in 1775, the movement carries the Geneva seal, an independent certification standard that says every visible component has been finished to the most exacting level in Swiss watchmaking. The Overseas has an interchangeable strap system, clever enough to be patented. It's a 41mm case with the caliber 5,100, 60-hour power reserve, and a blue dial that makes Patek's equivalent look slightly overdressed. On the secondary market, it trades at 40% below retail. Per Watch Charts' mid-year 2025 report, the average value retention for the Vacheron Constantin Overseas collection is negative 40%. A standard steel 4,500 V retails at around $25,000. On the secondary market, clean, complete examples settle around $15,000 to $17,000. Here's the observation nobody puts in the review articles. This watch is technically superior to a Rolex Submariner in almost every measurable category. More complex movement, more thorough case finishing, older brand heritage. The Submariner retails at $11,000 and trades above retail. The Overseas retails at $25,000 and trades at $15,000. The market is not rewarding craft. It's rewarding cultural penetration. And Vacheron has never been willing to play the cultural game the way Rolex plays it. In a 2026 analysis published by Watch Dossier, writer Sergio Galanti put it precisely. The secondary market isn't pricing the object, it's pricing the collective conviction surrounding the object. Vacheron's conviction problem is that it remains a connoisseur's brand in a market where connoisseurship isn't the currency that drives secondary premiums. The Geneva seal on the rotor impresses the 12% of buyers who know what a Geneva seal is. The other 88% price the name, not the stamp. Whether that's noble restraint or just expensive pride depends on whether you own one. There's a version of this story where Vacheron's relative restraint is vindicated over a 20-year horizon. Brands that never chased hype don't crash the way hype-dependent brands crash. The Overseas has held a more stable price curve than the Nautilus or the Royal Oak since the market peaked in 2022. The floor is lower, but it's a more honest floor. That doesn't make the 40% discount sting any less if you bought at retail last year. Vacheron's problem was cultural. The next watch had a cultural moment. It just arrived at exactly the wrong time. 6 Omega Seamaster Diver, 300M, standard steel, non-bond reference. The Omega Seamaster Diver 300M and the James Bond connection are inseparable. Every Diver 300M carries the proximity to that association, whether the specific reference is the Bond edition or not. The Coaxial Master Chronometer Ref, 210.30.42.20, 1.001 The standard steel version benefits from the cultural weight of a franchise it didn't actually appear in. But it doesn't own that cultural weight. And when the market started paying attention to the difference, the discount opened. The standard steel Diver 300M retails at just under $6,000. On the secondary market, it's trading in the 35 to 40% below retail range, sometimes lower on more common dial configurations. Per watch charts, Omega's overall value retention sits at negative 35% across the brand. That means the brand that sold you on Swiss Prestige and Master Chronometer certification is, on average, returning you about 65 cents on the dollar when you sell. The mechanism is simple and somewhat brutal. Omega produced a lot of these. The Seamaster Diver 300M is a good watch, but Omega manufactures hundreds of thousands annually across the Seamaster line. When the pandemic boom ended in 2022, authorized dealers held enormous inventory. Gray market dealers held more. Prices dropped to move stock. And once a secondary price establishes itself at a discount level, it rarely climbs back without an external catalyst. The watch didn't get worse. The market got full. Those two things look identical from the outside. Picture a 40-year-old who bought the Steel Diver 300M in 2021 as a milestone purchase. First time spending real money on a watch, $6,000. He bought it because Daniel Craig wore something very close to it in a franchise he loved. He'd watched Spectre 3 times. He liked the idea that the watch he wore to work had that association. By late 2023, Chrono 24 has the same reference at roughly $3,800. He looks at the listing because a colleague mentioned something about the secondary market. He closes the tab, doesn't look again for 6 months. The feeling that comes with that tab close is specific. It's not grief. It's the particular mild nausea of discovering that the purchase you made as a statement came with a clause in the fine print you didn't read. If you own one of these and you're watching this with a slightly sick feeling, you're not alone. So, Omega sold too many watches. The next brand had the opposite problem. It launched a watch nobody wanted and then made the mistake of telling them they should. 5 Audemars Piguet code 11.59. In 2019, Audemars Piguet launched the code 11.59 at Watches and Wonders. The marketing was bold. A new case architecture, a new movement family. AP's next chapter, after 47 years of Royal Oak dominance. The press materials were confident. Jean-Baptiste Gilles, AP's head of complications, told journalists the collection would write the future of the brand. Collectors were not moved. Within 6 months of the launch, forum threads on What You Seek and Reddit had generated thousands of posts cataloging what buyers found wrong with it. The case was too busy. The lugs felt overworked. The transition from a round case to an octagonal bezel looked like a committee decision. The movement, technically impressive with AP's in-house 4,302 caliber, was hidden behind a solid caseback. You were paying for the engineering without seeing it. And the price sat at $35,000, within range of Royal Oaks, which made the comparison unavoidable. The Royal Oak had context. 47 years of it. The Code 1.59, had a launch event and some press materials. Secondary market reality in 2025. The Code 1.59 trades at 33% below retail, per Watch Pro's market tracking. A $35,000 watch available for $23,000. AP raised prices on the collection twice since launch, which meant buyers who bought at announcement price hold watches that can't recoup what they paid. The Code 1.59 is not a bad watch. That's almost the point. It's technically accomplished. But it launched into the shadow of the Royal Oak, and in that shadow, technically accomplished is not enough. The Royal Oak exists. The comparison is permanent. And there's one more layer. AP raised retail prices on the Code 1.59 twice since launch, presumably on the theory that higher prices signal higher value. In the Royal Oak's case, that logic has historically worked. But it only works if the market has already accepted the watch's premise. The Code 1.59's premise was never accepted. The price increases made the secondary discount look even starker. You're buying at $40,000 now for a watch that trades at $27,000. That's not a failed product. It's a failed launch that the brand has been unable to reverse, with years of continued production. A forum thread on Watch You Seek from early 2024 captured it plainly. Someone asked whether the code 11.59 would ever recover its secondary market position. The most upvoted response: "The watch needs a cultural moment. You can't manufacture those." It has 4,000 upvotes, and nobody has disagreed in a year and a half. AP made a watch the market didn't need. The next entry is the market making its own decision. In 48 hours. 4 Swatch X Audemars Piguet Royal Pop. The 16th of May 2026. 5 in the morning. The Carousel du Louvre hasn't opened its access gates yet, but 400 people have been camping outside the Musée des Arts Décoratifs since the night before. Tokyo's Ginza queue is past 300. Singapore's store has been shuttered by police. In Mumbai, a crowd that formed 3 days early has been managed by security since Wednesday. The Swatch X AP Royal Pop launched to scenes that looked like a public emergency. By Sunday evening, the chaos had another number attached to it: 72%. That's how far the resale price dropped in a single trading day. Launch day listings were hitting $4,400. 48 hours later, the same watches were selling for $1,200, according to WatchGuys' real-time market tracking. The trigger was the hype crowd assumed this would be a wristwatch, following the model of the Omega X Swatch Moon Swatch. What dropped instead was a bioceramic pocket watch on a calfskin lanyard across 8 colorways, retailing at $400 and $420 respectively. Beautiful objects: the royal oak octagonal bezel, 8 hexagonal screws, the petite tapisserie dial pattern, rendered in Swatch's pop-era color blocking. But a pocket watch, not a wrist piece. Not a wrist piece that the speculative tier had queued overnight for. They started selling. Everyone started selling at once. The floor disappeared in real time. For comparison, the Moon Swatch launched in March 2022 with day one resale at roughly $2,400 against a retail of $260. Within 6 months, prices had settled into a $400 to $700 range. The Royal Pop tracked the same curve, just compressed into days instead of months. This is what event-driven collapse looks like at speed. Not over months, in hours. You can watch it happen on the sold listings. The Royal Pop collapsed over a weekend. The next watch collapsed over a decade. The buyers didn't notice until it was over. 3 Omega Seamaster Planet Ocean. The Planet Ocean entered the Seamaster family in 2005 as the technical diver's alternative, bigger and heavier than the Diver 300M, with deeper water resistance ratings and a more overtly engineered case. It was the watch for buyers who found the Diver 300M slightly too mainstream, too easy to explain at dinner. The Planet Ocean had gravity to it. A 45mm case on some references. Ceramic bezel. Planet-themed dial options. Coaxial movements with serious depth ratings. For a while, the positioning worked. Collectors who wanted something serious but not Rolex adjacent settled here. Then 2 things happened at once. The Diver 300M got James Bond, starting with Daniel Craig's Casino Royale in 2006 and cementing through the subsequent films. And the collecting community, between 2018 and 2023, started rewarding smaller case sizes with serious intent. The Christopher Ward C60 generation, the 36mm Submariner Conversations, the vintage Speedy revival. The Planet Ocean was suddenly large in an era that had decided large was optional. The Bond affiliation, which should have lifted the whole Seamaster family, landed almost entirely on the Diver 300M. Planet Ocean owners watched the prestige arrive and skipped them. Secondary market in 2025. 40 to 45% below retail on most steel references, per Chrono 24 current listings. The Planet Ocean at a 5 to 100 meter water resistance rating is available for well under $5,000 on a watch that cost $8,000 to $10,000 at recent retail. The specific sting is that the Diver 300M, which the Planet Ocean was positioned above, now commands higher emotional premiums in collector discussions. The hierarchy flipped. The planet Ocean got left behind when the cultural moment moved. The next watch is the moment where the mathematics of speculation caught up to the story. 2 Patek Philippe Nautilus, 5,711 over 1A. In January 2021, Patek Philippe president Thierry Stern confirmed what the community had been whispering about for months. The steel Nautilus Ref 5,711 was discontinued, not relaunched, not modernized, retired. The most desired watch in the world by waiting list mathematics was going out of production at the height of its fame. "We cannot put a single watch on top of our pyramid," Stern told the press. "It is not who we are." The market's response was immediate. Within weeks, the Blue Dial 5,711 over 1A, which had been trading around $70,000, crossed 100,000. By April 2022, the secondary market peak, it had reached $131,504 per secondary market data tracked by watch charts. A watch whose last retail price was approximately $34,900 was trading at nearly 4 times that. People who had bought years earlier at retail were sitting on unrealized gains that felt like a second salary. Then May 2022, the broader secondary watch market peaked and began reversing. Rising interest rates, pandemic liquidity drying up, dealers with enormous gray market inventory and no clear exit. The Nautilus 5,711 over 1A came down with everything else, but from a much higher altitude. The Blue Dial 5,711 over 1A now trades around $89,000 per Chrono 24 and secondary market data through 2025. That's down 32% from the peak. In dollar terms, a buyer at the 2022 summit has lost approximately $42,000 per watch. The Green Dial 5,711 over 1A, Patek's farewell version produced for just under a year, still trades around $249,000. The Tiffany Blue edition of 170 pieces sold at auction in December 2021 for $6.5 million. Both numbers exist in the same collection, at the same moment, in the same market. The spread between what the rarest Nautilus commands and what the standard Blue Dial now trades at is its own story about what happened between 2021 and 2025. The 5,711 over 1A is not worthless. But the people who bought at peak speculation paid for a narrative that included perpetual appreciation. The market had other plans. There is a kind of buyer who appeared in 2021 and 2022 that the watch industry had never quite seen before. Not collectors, not enthusiasts. Speculators who had read the 2021 Morgan Stanley Luxury Watch Report and saw the graphs going up. People who bought Nautiluses the way people buy index funds. No particular feeling about Gerald Genta's 1976 porthole design. No attachment to what the watch says about who wears it. A position on a chart. When the chart reversed, those buyers had no sentimental reason to hold. They sold. They all sold at once. And that is the precise mechanism behind the largest dollar value single watch collapse on this list. Not brand failure, not design problems, not quality issues. A speculator cohort discovering simultaneously that the chart had stopped going up and that they didn't love the watch enough to wait it out. The collector who bought the 5,711 over 1A in 2015 for $28,000 and wears it to this day has a completely different relationship with this number. To them, the secondary market price is theoretical. They're not selling. The damage was done entirely to the people who arrived in 2021 because of the graph. That's probably the cleanest lesson on this whole list. A watch is worth what someone will pay for it. But it's worth nothing if the reason someone paid for it was that someone else was going to pay more. The Nautilus buyers at the peak were chasing a story that ended. The final watch is a different kind of story. The watch nobody wanted. Then the watch everybody wanted. Then the math catching up. 1 Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Chronograph, Ref. 26470 ST. The Royal Oak Offshore launched in 1993. It was designed as an oversized, aggressive riff on Gerald Genta's original Royal Oak. Louder, heavier, more deliberately physical, the standard Royal Oak was a gentleman's sports watch. The Offshore was something else, closer to a declaration of intent. It was nicknamed the Beast within the year. Before watch collecting was a mainstream cultural event, the Offshore was already a cultural phenomenon. Jay-Z wore one. Arnold Schwarzenegger had the yellow gold reference AP produced for him specifically. Formula One drivers wore it in the 90s, when it felt almost impractical to own a watch worth that much at 200 miles per hour. The oversized dimensions were a feature rather than a flaw. Unapologetically large in an era before large became the norm. Then two things shifted. First, the luxury watch market reorganized around institutional credibility. The standard Royal Oak, the 39mm jumbo with the caliber 2000, 121, became the investment-grade asset. Clean steel jumbos now trade above retail with persistence. The original gained status in a way that reflected back to where Gerald Genta's design was at its most precise. The Offshore gained weight over the years, in product terms, but not the same institutional weight the original accumulated. Second, the 2022 secondary market correction hit the Offshore harder than almost anything else in AP's catalog. The Ref 26470 ST retailed at $37,100 in 2019. Per Chrono 24 market data tracked through December 2025, it now trades at approximately $19,255, 52% of what someone paid 6 years ago. Some Royal Oak Offshore references are trading at around 52 cents on the retail dollar, per secondary market tracking published by The Luxury Playbook in December 2025. Compared with the standard Royal Oak, which trades above retail, the same brand name produces two entirely different financial outcomes, depending on which side of the case size and culture line you're standing on. There is a specific kind of loss here, not just the dollar loss from $37,000 to $19,000. The loss of someone who paid a premium because the Beast had a cultural identity that felt like it had permanence. And somewhere in the last 6 years, quietly and without announcement, that cultural identity didn't hold. The Offshore still exists. AP still makes it. The watch is still the Beast. But the premium you paid for that mythology is sitting somewhere between $37,000 and $19,000, and the market will not give it back. What bothers me most about the Offshore story is the asymmetry inside the same brand. The Royal Oak Jumbo in steel, the 15202 ST, trades comfortably above retail. It has been doing that through the correction period when everything else around it lost value. Two watches. Same brand, same octagonal bezel ancestry, same Gerald Genta DNA. One trades above retail, and the other trades at 52 cents on the retail dollar. The difference is not quality. AP's quality control across both lines is the same. The difference is which one the collecting community decided was the honest version of the idea. The Jumbo is minimal. It says nothing extra. The Offshore said a lot, for a long time, and now the conversation has moved on and left it speaking to a room that isn't as full as it used to be. The watches that hold value over the long run share permission, the kind a buying public gives a brand to charge for the story wrapped around the object. Rolex has that permission. Patek has it. A few others hold pieces of it. And the moment that permission turns even slightly conditional, the secondary market finds out first. So, which of your watches has that permission? Like and subscribe.